Have you ever thought about it? The world's most powerful weapon is neither a nuclear bomb nor a fleet of aircraft carriers. It is that green piece of paper in your pocket, the US dollar. Most of us see the dollar as just an ordinary currency, yet it is the throne of an invisible empire. It directs the flow of oil, determines the locations of wars, shapes nations' debt burdens, and can paralyze economies with the press of a button. This dominance is not the result of coincidences or the triumph of free markets. On the contrary, it stems from a secret agreement made behind closed doors half a century ago. Come, let's go back 50 years together. In 1974, a quiet negotiation took place between the royal family of a country almost 95% covered in deserts and Washington's elites. This deal chained oil to the dollar and turned the dollar into the world's indispensable operating system. We call this unnamed arrangement the Petrodollar system. Since that day, every gas tank fill-up, every factory operation, and every global trade flow has been feeding this invisible network. But now, exactly 50 years later, the pillars of the system are slowly starting to crack. China is buying oil with yuan. Russia is bypassing the dollar. And even Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the agreement, is flirting with alternative paths. Is the greatest financial hegemony in history quietly approaching its end? This is not just economic history. It is also the history of power. And those who do not know this story will be caught unprepared when change arrives. Now, let's examine step by step how this invisible empire was born, how it ruled, and why it is starting to wobble. The petrodollar system is one of the most powerful and least known mechanisms of the modern world. The US dollar has gone beyond being merely a currency. It has become the cornerstone of the global economy and the silent carrier of geopolitical power. This dominance is not a natural outcome of free markets. Rather, it is a product of deliberate design, secret agreements, and strategic moves. The arrangement that emerged from tying oil to the dollar has been shaping the world economy for half a century, determining the direction of wars, and influencing the fates of nations. The story's origins date back to just after World War II. In 1944, while the wounds of war were still fresh, more than 700 delegates from 44 countries gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, USA. The goal was to build a new international monetary system on the ruins of a destroyed world. The decision taken changed history. The US dollar was declared the global reserve currency. It was firmly pegged to gold. Each ounce of gold could be exchanged for $35. Other nations' currencies would be tied to the dollar, and the US would commit to backing those dollars with gold. At that time, this arrangement made perfect sense. The US held the world's largest gold reserves. Its economy was unrivaled in the post-war period. Because the US had generated massive income by issuing large amounts of government bonds in every war it entered. Therefore, the dollar was considered as reliable as gold. The system worked smoothly for about a quarter century. However, from the 1960s onward, it began to crack slowly. The U.S. was bearing the heavy financial burden of the Vietnam War on one hand and making massive expenditures for President Lyndon Johnson's ambitious domestic reforms, the Great Society programs. On the other, U.S. budget deficits grew rapidly. The Federal Reserve had to do what every struggling economy does. It started printing money to finance these deficits. Suddenly, the world was flooded with increasing amounts of dollars. European countries, led especially by French President Charles de Gaulle, realized the gravity of the situation and began exchanging their dollars for gold. This caused U.S. gold stocks to gradually melt away. In August 1971, President Richard Nixon announced in a televised speech what he called a temporary measure. The convertibility of the dollar into gold was ended. From then on, the dollar relied solely on the credibility of the U.S. government. This decision brought the global financial system to the brink of chaos. Why trust a currency detached from gold? Right in this fragile period, the 1973 oil crisis erupted. OPEC's Arab members declared an oil embargo due to U.S. support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Oil prices quadrupled in a few months. Gas lines formed in the U.S. Factories shut down in Europe. The world painfully realized that oil was not just a commodity. It was the blood flowing in the veins of modern civilization. Washington, which turns every war and chaos in the world into an opportunity, turned this crisis into one as well. Nixon's Secretary of State Henry Kissinger began intense and secret talks with Saudi Arabia. The agreement reached in 1974 was simple but transformative. Saudi Arabia would price and sell all its oil exports exclusively in U.S. dollars. Any buyer in the world, Japan, Germany, or any other country, would have to pay for oil in dollars. In return, the U.S. provided the Saudi dynasty with comprehensive security guarantees, sales of the most advanced weapons, protection against external threats, and support for internal stability. More importantly and crucially, the Saudis would redirect their massive dollar revenues, petrodollars, back into U.S. Treasury bonds and the American financial system. In other words, the money would circle back into America's coffers. This agreement required neither congressional approval nor public disclosure. It was shaped behind closed doors between the ruling elites of the two countries. Soon after, other OPEC members adopted the same system. Thus, the petrodollar order was born. Now, every country wanting to import oil had to first acquire dollars. Energy indispensable to modern economies created structural demand for the dollar. Even countries ideologically opposed to the U.S. had to hold dollars in their reserves. The dollar had found an anchor stronger than gold: oil. The system became a self-sustaining cycle. As Gulf countries sold oil, they earned trillions of dollars. Due to limited domestic consumption capacity, a significant portion of this money flowed back into U.S. financial markets. Treasury bonds were purchased. Investments were made in banks. This flow gave the U.S. a unique privilege: the ability to run constant budget deficits, borrow at low costs, and print money freely, what the French called exorbitant privilege. In the 1970s and 1980s, this cycle also affected developing countries. Petrodollars were pumped as loans to Latin America via Wall Street. It initially looked like growth. Then Fed interest rate hikes made debt servicing unbearable. The chain reaction, starting with the 1982 Mexico crisis, brought an entire lost decade. Profit stayed in financial centers. The pain was lived in debtor countries. The petrodollar arrangement was not just economic. It was a geopolitical weapon. Those who tried to exit the system paid heavy prices. Iraq's 2000 attempt to sell oil in euros ended with the 2003 invasion. Libyan leader Gaddafi's idea of a gold-backed Pan-African currency was terminated with the 2011 intervention. Iran's dollar-free trade attempts have been met with years of sanctions. Although official justifications varied, the message was the same: the petrodollar order cannot be challenged. But what we are constantly told on news sites is so different. We are bringing democracy and freedom to all these countries I mentioned, with endless pretexts like chemical weapon production, Arab Spring, and more. All these countries were somehow brought under control. Look at today's oil-rich Venezuela government, which was neutralized overnight with a different pretext and brought under control. It's not hard to predict what will happen tomorrow. Now Iran is in the crosshairs. Let's see what the excuse will be this time. For half a century, this system has weathered crises, financed wars, and directed global trade. However, no hegemony is eternal. Today, the cracks are deepening. China is expanding ways to pay for oil in yuan. Russia is trading in rubles and yuan amid sanctions. Even Saudi Arabia is opening doors to alternative payment mechanisms. Local currencies and gold swaps are discussed among BRICS countries. This transformation is eroding the structural demand for the dollar. As automatic demand decreases, the U.S.'s privilege of cheap borrowing, exporting inflation, and the power of financial sanctions will weaken. For a debt-based economy, this means a profound existential threat. Change is progressing slowly. The system's roots are deep, but the direction is clear: from a unipolar financial order to a multipolar world. An order built with secret agreements remains fragile as long as it stands without the consent of the people. The petrodollar is not just monetary history. It is power history. If we want to understand why inflation spreads differently from country to country, why Fed decisions affect food prices on the other side of the world, or why conflicts in oil regions never end, we must know this story. Money is never neutral. It is always the carrier of a will, a strategy. That secret pact made in 1974 shaped the world as it is today. We have been living in its shadow for half a century. But history has repeatedly shown that empires rise and fall. The gold standard was thought eternal. It ended with a decree. The petrodollar faces a similar fate. The cracks are growing. The pillars are shaking. What do you think will be the U.S.'s new strategy when the petrodollar ends? Share your views in the comments. Change will not be quiet when it comes. It will be sudden, profound, and irreversible. On that day, those who understood how this order worked in advance will stand firm. The rest will be swept away by the flow of history. This is not just an economic analysis. It is a cautionary financial tale, because the most effective tool of power is often the invisible one, and the petrodollar has managed to remain invisible for a long time. If everything I've told has changed your perspective, then it has achieved its purpose. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're interested in similar financial stories, you can visit my channel. See you in the next story. Goodbye.